It is a Friday afternoon in March. You are 63 years old. You have spent the last 35 years doing everything the financial world told you to do. You maxed out your 401k. You lived below your means. You sat through crashes and kept buying. And now, you are sitting on a portfolio worth $1.2 million. The spreadsheet says you are golden. Your advisor shakes your hand and says, "Congratulations, you can retire." So you do. You throw the little office party. You get the cake with the frosting that tastes like nothing. Your coworkers sign a card. And on a Friday afternoon in March, you walk out the door for the last time, and you feel like you just won the entire game. 6 months later, the market drops 28%. Your portfolio goes from 1.2 million to 860,000 in what feels like a blink. And here is the thing that makes your stomach turn. The bills did not drop with it. The mortgage is still due. The insurance premiums are still climbing. Your wife still wants to visit the grandkids in Denver. And so you do what the plan says. You pull your $48,000 for the year because 4% of 1.2 million is 48,000. And that is what the rule told you to take. Except now, you are not pulling 4%. You are pulling 5.6% from a shrinking base, and every dollar you pull out is a dollar that will never compound again. It is gone, permanently, not sleeping, not growing, just gone. And that single year, that one brutal stretch of bad luck at the worst possible moment, just quietly sentenced your retirement to life on a tighter leash. This is the story that nobody tells you when they hand you that golden number, 4%. Withdraw 4% and you will be fine. Adjust for inflation. Do not worry, the math works. Except it does not. Not like that. Not as a rule you follow blindly for 3 decades while the world throws curveballs at your face. My name is Bobby, and I spend an unreasonable amount of time studying the exposed wiring behind the financial advice that most people never question. And today, we are going to dismantle the most dangerously oversimplified piece of retirement advice on the internet. We are going to talk about why the 4% rule is not a rule, why following it blindly could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, and what actually works when you are trying to make a pile of money last for the rest of your life. Let us start with where this whole thing came from, because context matters and almost nobody gives it to you. In 1994, a financial planner named William Bengen sat down with a spreadsheet and a book of historical market data and asked a simple question: how much can someone pull from their retirement portfolio every year without running out of money over 30 years? He tested different withdrawal rates against every 30-year stretch of market history going back to 1926. He used a hypothetical portfolio split evenly between stocks and intermediate government bonds, and he found that a starting withdrawal rate of about 4%, adjusted upward each year for inflation, survived every single historical scenario he tested, even the ugliest ones. Even someone who retired right at the peak in 1968 before a decade of brutal inflation and stagnant markets. That was the birth of the 4% rule, and to be fair to Bengen, it was a genuinely useful piece of research. The problem is, what happened next? The financial media grabbed that number and stripped away every piece of nuance. They turned a worst-case survival rate into a universal retirement commandment. They made it sound like a guarantee instead of a floor, and millions of people started building their entire financial future around a single number that was designed for the most pessimistic outcome in American market history. Here is what Bengen himself has said in the years since. The 4% rate was the worst-case scenario. The average safe withdrawal rate across the last 100 years of data is closer to 7%. He has revised his own number upward to 4.7% based on more diversified portfolios, and he has been clear that individual circumstances, market conditions, and flexibility should all factor into the decision. But nobody wants to hear that. People want one number, one rule, one thing to memorize and never think about again. And that desire for simplicity, that craving for a financial commandment that fits on a napkin, is exactly what makes the 4% rule so dangerous. Because the world is not simple, markets are not predictable, and your life at 75 is going to look nothing like your life at 65. A rule that cannot accommodate that reality is not protecting you, it is blinding you. Because here is the dirty secret buried inside the math. The 4% rule does not fail because people withdraw too much money. It fails because of when the market decides to fall apart. And this is the concept that changes everything once you understand it. It is called sequence of returns risk. And it is the silent killer of retirement plans. Here is how it works, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Take 2 people. Both retire on the same day with $1 million. Both withdraw $50,000 a year. Both earn an average annual return of 7% over 20 years. On paper, they are identical twins. The financial planning software gives them the same success rate. Their advisors shake both their hands and say you are good to go. But person 1 gets hit with a 15% decline in year 1 and year 2, followed by solid returns for the next 16 years. Person 2 gets those same solid returns first, and the 15% decline does not show up until year 10 and 11. Same average return, same total amount of money earned by the market, same withdrawals, but person 1 runs out of money years before person 2. In some models, the gap is not just significant, it is catastrophic. One person ends up with over $1 million left at the end. The other is staring at a zero balance and wondering what went wrong, and the only difference between them was luck. Pure, blind, uncontrollable luck, about which year the downturn decided to show up. That is not a math error. That is not a failure of planning. That is the brutal reality of pulling money from a falling portfolio. When you sell into a declining market to fund your life, you are permanently destroying shares that would have participated in the recovery. You are locking in losses at the worst possible moment, and the compounding engine that was supposed to carry you for 30 years just lost a cylinder. It will never get back. Research from nearly every major financial institution confirms this. The first 5 to 10 years of retirement are the fragility zone. What happens to your portfolio during that window has more impact on your long-term outcome than almost any other variable, more than your total return, more than your asset allocation, more than how much you saved. The timing of the damage matters more than the size of the damage. And that is why the 4% rule, applied rigidly, is a trap, because it tells you to keep withdrawing the same inflation-adjusted dollar amount, regardless of what is happening to your portfolio. The market crashes 30%, and the rule says, keep pulling your $48,000. Your portfolio is bleeding, and the rule says, do not adapt, do not think, just follow the number. That is not a plan. That is an autopilot program flying you into a mountain. Now here is where most people get stuck. Not in their portfolio, in their head, because there is a psychological trap that is almost as destructive as the mathematical one. When the market falls and someone suggests you reduce your spending, something inside your chest tightens, a voice in the back of your skull says, if I cut back now, this is my life forever. This is the new normal. I will never get back to where I was. And that fear, that gut-level terror of downward mobility, keeps people locked into rigid spending plans that are actively destroying their financial future. They would rather follow a broken rule than face the discomfort of adapting. Think about how bizarre this actually is when you step back. You spent your entire working life adjusting. You got raises, and you spent more. You changed jobs and your income shifted. You had kids and your expenses exploded overnight. You dealt with layoffs, windfalls, surprise medical bills, and year-end bonuses that changed your plans. Your financial life was never static for a single calendar year. But the moment you retire, suddenly the plan says pick one number and never change it for 30 years. As if the world stops being unpredictable the day you clean out your desk. That rigidity is not safety. It is fragility dressed up in a suit, and the people who cling to it are not protecting themselves. They are refusing to adapt because adapting feels like losing, even when adapting is the only thing that can save them. But the data does not support that fear, not even close. What decades of research actually shows is that temporary spending reductions during market stress, followed by increases when the portfolio recovers, produce dramatically better outcomes than rigid withdrawal strategies. The key word is temporary. You are not cutting your lifestyle forever. You are pressing pause on a raise until the storm passes. And the storm always passes. This is where the real innovation in retirement planning lives, not in finding the perfect withdrawal number, but in building a system that responds to reality instead of ignoring it. The most powerful version of this is called a guardrails approach. It was originally developed by a financial planner named Jonathan Guyton and a computer scientist named William Klinger back in 2006. And the concept is elegant. Instead of picking one number and sticking to it for 30 years, you set upper and lower boundaries around your withdrawal rate. If the market performs well and your withdrawal rate drops significantly below your starting point, you give yourself a raise. If the market struggles and your withdrawal rate climbs dangerously above your starting point, you temporarily reduce your spending. The thresholds are wide enough that you ignore the everyday noise of the market. You are not reacting to a 3% dip or a 5% rally. You are only making adjustments when your portfolio is genuinely under stress or genuinely thriving. And the research on this approach is striking. Studies have shown that retirees who use a guardrails framework can safely start with a withdrawal rate closer to 5% while maintaining sustainability over 30 or even 40 years. That is a massive improvement over the rigid 4% approach. We are talking about 20 to 30% more lifetime income. But here is the part that matters most, and it is the part that most people miss entirely. Guardrails are not just about cutting, they are about raising. This is where a researcher named Michael Kitzes made what I consider one of the most important contributions to retirement planning in the last 2 decades. He proposed what is called a ratcheting strategy. The concept is simple. You start with a conservative withdrawal rate, say 4%, but you build in a rule that says if your portfolio ever climbs 50% above its starting value, you give yourself a 10% raise in spending, not inflation, a real raise, and you revisit this every 3 years. So imagine you retire with $1 million and start pulling $40,000 a year. 5 years later, through solid returns and moderate spending, your portfolio has grown to $1.5 million. The ratcheting rule kicks in. Your spending goes from $40,000 to $44,000, and if the portfolio keeps growing to $2.25 million, another 10% raise. You are now spending $48,400, and your portfolio can handle it because it grew faster than your spending. Kitzes tested this against every historical scenario going back to 1926, and the result was what game theorists call a weakly dominant strategy. It produced equal or better outcomes than the traditional 4% rule in every single scenario. In good times, you spend more and actually enjoy the wealth you built. In bad times, the spending floor holds, and you never have to cut. You just do not get the raise. That is not a theoretical improvement. That is the difference between dying with a pile of regret and a swollen portfolio, and actually living the retirement you spent 35 years earning. Now let me take this one layer deeper, because the smartest retirees I have studied are not just using flexible withdrawal strategies, they are building something I think of as an income architecture. Multiple streams of money flowing in at different times, from different sources, each serving a different purpose. And this is where retirement planning goes from being a math problem to being an engineering problem. Think about it this way. If your entire retirement income comes from one portfolio, then every single dollar you spend requires a sell decision. Every grocery run is a stock sale. Every vacation is a liquidation event. Every time you swipe your card for gas or a dinner out, somewhere in the background, shares are being sold. And when the market is down, every one of those transactions is a wound. You are selling low to live. That is the exact opposite of everything you did during your accumulation years. But what if you built a structure where your essential living expenses, the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the health insurance, the car payment, were covered by income sources that have nothing to do with the stock market? Social security, a pension, if you are lucky enough to have one. Maybe a small annuity that covers your fixed monthly costs. Maybe part-time work for the first few years doing something you actually enjoy, not because you need to, but because it gives you breathing room. This is not about being rich enough to have 5 income streams. It is about being strategic enough to sequence them correctly. And the difference it makes is staggering. When your non-negotiable expenses are covered by guaranteed income streams, something remarkable happens to your psychology and your portfolio simultaneously. Your investment portfolio transforms. It stops being your lifeline and starts being your opportunity fund. It is no longer the thing keeping you alive. It is the thing that lets you live well. And when the market drops 20%, you do not panic. You do not sell at the bottom. You do not lie awake at 3 in the morning, calculating how many years you have left before the money runs out. You shrug. Because your groceries are paid for, your lights are on, your health insurance is covered. The portfolio can sit there untouched and recover in its own time. And that patience, that ability to simply wait, is worth more than any withdrawal rate calculation ever invented. This is why the timing of Social Security matters so much more than most people realize. Every year you delay claiming past your full retirement age, your benefit grows by roughly 8%. Delay from 67 to 70, and you lock in a 24% increase in your monthly check, for life, adjusted for inflation. That is the single best guaranteed return available to almost any American retiree, and it fundamentally changes the math on everything else. If you can bridge the gap between retirement and age 70 using your portfolio or other savings, you are essentially buying yourself a bigger, permanent income floor. And once that floor is high enough to cover your essentials, the pressure on your portfolio drops dramatically. You can afford to be flexible. You can afford to ride out the storms. You can afford to let the ratcheting strategy work its magic over decades. Now let me bring this all together with a real scenario, because I want you to see how these pieces fit and why this matters so much more than memorizing a number. Imagine someone retiring at 65 with $1 million in their portfolio and a plan to delay Social Security until 70. They are 65, so they need to bridge 5 years. During those 5 years, they pull from their portfolio roughly $60,000 per year. That sounds aggressive, and it is, but it is temporary and strategic. They know the drawdown is coming, and they have planned for it. By age 70, Social Security kicks in at a higher benefit. Let us say $36,000 a year, adjusted for inflation every year after that for the rest of their life. Now their portfolio, after 5 years of withdrawals and hopefully some growth, sits at maybe $800,000. But here is where the math changes entirely. Their annual need from the portfolio just dropped dramatically. If they need $80,000 a year total and Social Security covers $36,000, they only need $44,000 from the portfolio. That is a 5.5% withdrawal rate on $800,000, which sounds high on paper, but with a guardrails approach and the flexibility to temporarily reduce in bad years, the research says it is sustainable. And here is the beautiful part. If the market cooperates in those early years of full retirement, the ratcheting strategy allows them to increase their spending as the portfolio grows. They are not stuck at $44,000 forever. They have a system that rewards patience. Compare that to someone who panicked and claimed Social Security early at 62, locking in a permanently reduced benefit, and now needs to pull $70,000 a year from their portfolio to maintain the same lifestyle. Their withdrawal rate is higher, their guaranteed income floor is lower, and their exposure to sequence risk is dramatically worse. Every single market downturn hits them harder because they have less cushion and more dependence on the one thing they cannot control. Same starting portfolio, same lifestyle goals, completely different outcomes based purely on how the income architecture was designed. One person built a fortress with multiple walls. The other built a lean-to and hoped it would not rain. This is the difference between a retirement plan that is brittle and one that is resilient. A brittle plan has one lever: pull money from the portfolio and hope the market cooperates. A resilient plan has multiple levers: guaranteed income covering essentials, flexible withdrawals with guardrails, a ratcheting mechanism for the good years, and explicit decision rules that tell you exactly when to adjust and by how much. And here is the most important sentence in this entire conversation. You do not want the year you happen to retire to decide the quality of the next 30 years of your life. A bad year in the market is temporary. It always has been. Since 1950, the market has experienced a correction of at least 10% roughly every 3 years. That is not a flaw. It is the admission price. The question is not whether the market will drop after you retire. It will. The question is whether your plan was built to absorb it without breaking. The rigid 4% rule was not built for that. It was built for a spreadsheet. It was built for a world where you set one number and never deviate for 3 decades. That world does not exist. Your expenses will change. The market will surprise you. Inflation will zig when you expected it to zag. And the only retirement plan worth having is one that can handle all of it. So here is what I want you to walk away with. Stop worshiping the 4% rule. It was never a rule. It was a worst-case starting point created by a financial planner with a spreadsheet in 1994. The man who invented it has spent the last 3 decades telling people they are using it wrong. Respect it for what it taught us, but do not chain your entire future to it. Build a system, not a number. Decision rules, guardrails, ratcheting, income layering. These are the tools that actually protect you when life does what life always does. A number is a guess, a system is a strategy. And strategy is what separates the retirees who thrive from the ones who spend 30 years slowly suffocating under a rule they were afraid to break. Cover your essentials with guaranteed income. The less your daily survival depends on the stock market, the more freedom you have to let your portfolio work for you instead of against you. When you do not need the market to feed you, the market becomes your ally instead of your master. Delay Social Security if you possibly can. That 8% annual increase is the closest thing to free money in the entire financial system. Every year you wait between 67 and 70, you are buying yourself a bigger, inflation-protected paycheck for the rest of your life. That is not a sacrifice. That is an investment in your own resilience. And give yourself permission to spend. This is the one that gets overlooked the most. And honestly, it might be the most important. Bengen himself has said that most retirees following the 4% rule will die with massive unspent portfolios and deep regret for not having lived more fully. You did not grind for 35 years, so your heirs could inherit your unused life. The ratcheting strategy exists specifically to solve this problem. When your portfolio grows, spend more. Take the trip. Help the grandkids. Upgrade the kitchen. You earned it. And the math says you can afford it. The market is going to do what it has always done. It is going to climb and crash and recover and climb again. Since 1950, we have seen corrections of 10% or more roughly every 3 years. That is not a warning sign. That is the normal operating temperature of the system that made you wealthy in the first place. The question was never whether the storm is coming. It is whether the house you built can stand when it arrives. Build the house right, and the storm becomes background noise. A headline that makes you look up from your coffee for a moment before you go back to living your life. Build it wrong, and one bad year at the wrong time can echo through every remaining year you have. The 4% rule was a good start, but a start is not a finish, and you deserve a plan that finishes the race, not one that trips over its own rigidity in the first mile. The choice is yours, but now at least, you know what the choice actually is.